Welcome back, everybody, to the last episode of the Classic Albums Month for 2023. Yeah, this is the last entry within August. So, yeah, I figured I'd go out with a bang. And when I had put this question out to my viewers, you guys, to say what classic albums would you like me to tackle and talk about, somebody had mentioned Octopus by Gentle Giant. I'm like, I've already done that one. I don't need to do that. And I then, before I hit send on my comment, I went back and I looked through all my videos and I'm like, I actually haven't done this one. So I think it's time to correct that error and talk about one of the best examples of eclectic progressive rock. Octopus by Gentle Giant. So Gentle Giant, I don't think needs a big introduction at this point. You know, they are literally a gentle giant within the progressive rock landscape. I always feel as though Gentle Giant is kind of the oddball kid in the classic lineup of the prog bands of the 70s. You know, they're a little too strange, a little too off. You know, they didn't quite get the same public success that, yes, Genesis, even King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of felt, but man, they had a very loyal and very active fan base that still persists to this day. And, you know, they're kind of like the music aficionado fan of like the fan base of progressive rock. You know, if you want something strange, if you want something weird, but you don't want to go straight into like Captain Beefheart, or you don't want the massive kind of discography or output that Frank Zappa had, Gentle Giant is the kind of the band for you, you know. And one of the things that really drew me to Gentle Giant, outside of their quirky time signatures, their syncopated and very interlaid time signatures, like rhythm sections and melodies in that kind of sense, or the round chorus that they would obviously have where everybody was singing all at different time signatures that would work in this really crazy round, is just the experimentation and the success rate that they had within their experimentation. So we got the boys on this one. You know, we got Derek Schulman, Gary Green, Kerry Minier, Philip Schulman, Raymond Schulman, and John Weathers, all kind of rounding off this band. And as I mentioned, this is their fourth studio record. This is also on the tails of Three Friends, which was released in the same year. So we kind of had a double punch. And in my mind, these are two of the best Gentle Giant records, of Three Friends and Octopus kind of having that 1-2 punch. This album is only about 34 minutes long, so it's fairly short and fairly concise. But within that 34 minutes, it is so dense, so packed full of tracks, and so packed full of like really juicy Octopus. Let's talk about Octopus. I didn't realize until much later on that it's a little bit of a play on words. Octopus being both the creature and, in my mind, that kind of otherworldly being, very similar to a lot of the sounds that we have on here. You know, the 8 driving tentacles that constantly move and kind of interweave themselves in this hypnotic pattern. But it's also a play on words in oct being 8, and there's 8 tracks, and opus or opus. So 8 little opuses. And I think that it's a very fitting title for this, you know, and each track really does do something very different and showcases the talents of the boys on here. I mean, you start with the advent of the Pangri that is just infectious right off the get-go. You know, you have this really crazy note sequences that are preluded by this very lovingly and hauntingly beautiful vocal styles. And a lot of that is led by Derek Schulman right off the get-go, where you have that like really like iconic sound that then has this really crazy like sound signatures, and like it's one of those like you can't quite dance to or groove to, but it makes sense just on an intuitive level. I love how groovy it is. I love how funky it is. Like the bass work that's found on here, that like it's so jazzy, and it feels like at any part, like any point, this could all fall apart because of how like intricately it has to be woven. But with that, you also have the really quick guitar solos or the violin solos that are just really quickly here and then gone. I love that kind of coming in and fading out. You know, it's very organic in that sense. It feels like you're listening to a live performance. And this is continued with Rantakor Troubadour, I believe is how you pronounce it, the second track. And again, it showcases some of the things that I love about Gentle Giant. I love this kind of harmonizations that we have within the vocal works. The vocal works are very odd and very strange, but I also love how quirky and almost minstrel it's sounding, especially within the midpoint of this. You have the the tambourine that's mainly bringing forth and bringing the main rhythm section on here. Like really, that's about it in terms of the rhythm, in terms of like a percussive instrument. Everything else is providing the rhythms in that sense. And I just love how we've got this really interesting like Moog or like electric piano that's kind of bringing forth the main rhythm section and the main essence and flow within this track. And then we move into A Cry for Everyone. And I love how this is a much more straightforward track, if you can call it that. Like it's mainly just the guitars and the keyboards that are trading back and forth on this one. And I love how each are so distinct, and yet they both carry over very, very well. Again, it's that quirky aspect, like how fast they're going, but also how they're able to rein it in. Like I love that. Like it's got this kind of like wave action to it. It's got this bounce to it that even though like the rhythm styles are really out of left field and really crazy, you can still kind of bounce along and groove to it. But then we come to probably my favorite track off of this album, which is Knots. And talk about those like very overlaid, very sophisticated vocal works. And what I love about this, and this is where the masters of Gentle Giant really come to, is that they're twisting the coils and twisting the coils and twisting the coils until you get to the chorus, if you could call that, with the main instrumentals. Because, there really is two phases of this that keep kind of going back and forth between one another. You have the overlay of the vocal works that just have this all in all we be boom, right? And they're kind of like overlaid on top of one another. And then the instrumental piece that kind of mirrors that, where you have this bow, 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 bow. And it feels as though the vocal side of things are tightening everything and really getting your back up until you get to that big cathartic release when you get to the instrumental part. And I love that. I love the tightening and the release. The tightening again and the release. It's almost like you're flexing your muscle to relax it again, and it's such a cathartic oomph. Not to talk about that xylophone solo right smack dab in the middle of this track. Like a lot of other bands would be like, oh, we'll put a xylophone kind of in the background for a little bit of padding, but Gentle Giant's like, no, we're going to put it front and center as the centerpiece, and we're just going to let everybody else just shh, let the boy cook, and it's just so good. It's just so delicious. And then we open up into the second side with the boys in the band, and I love how this starts off with literally like a coin being kind of flicked on a table, and the moment that it stops is when the band just breaks into sound. And I love how this is the purely instrumental track off of the album, and I love how insane it gets. Like I love how everybody has their moment to shine. Everybody knows when to take a little bit of a step back, but they're really summarizing the album up to this point. It's fast paced, it's so dense, it's so powerhoused, but you're also able to just kind of take a step back and just be like, whoa, these guys are really doing something pretty incredible. Then we come into two of the smaller tracks on here in terms of like beat structure, in terms of like really insanity. Dog's Life is really just a snapshot of a dog's day, and I love how kind of subtly like menacing it is. It's like, yeah, I'm this is me as a dog, but like I'm still a beast, I'm still an animal, but I've been tamed, and I'm going to allow that timidity to permeate as long as it satisfies my needs. And I just love how kind of like fun and quirky this track is. This one really lets the synthesizers and the violins kind of take center stage, and it's just kind of like a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Now, for the longest time, the next track of Think of Me with Kindness was the track that I loved the most off of this one. Knots definitely came and superseded it, but Think of Me with Kindness is such a heartfelt and beautiful ballad. It's kind of like the actual single off this album. I feel like more people would be able to sit down and stomach this track. It really is such a heart-wrenching piano ballad that really is like a wish to be remembered, but when you do remember, to think of me kindly, to think of me with kindness. And I really love that. I love how it's so heartwarming. I love that big, like, crescendo that we have at the end that would be really, really played with in the follow-up album of In a Glass House, with some of the tracks on there with this big crescendo, this big boof. But yeah, I think of Me With Kindness was kind of the structure for that. And then the final track of River closes off the album perfectly. You know, it's crazy, it's all over the place, but it still has that groove, it still has that funk, it still has that kind of jazzy approach to it. And I love how everybody comes back in. You got the guitars paired with the violins, paired with the keyboards, and everybody's playing around very, very well. It does feel as though you're kind of drifting along a not so lazy river in that sense. You know, it's a little bit more bombastic than your usual kind of grooving track, but I love the fact that they're really able to kind of round off this album very cleanly with this final track. So yeah, I mean, in the end, Octopus really is 8 opuses. They're just so well suited. Like, you can tell these boys were really meticulous with the construction of each of these tracks, and they're all fairly short, you know, like River is probably the longest one at almost 6 minutes long. Everything else is right around the 3.5 to 4 minute length, and they're so fast and so contained that you can miss a lot, and it takes quite a bit of time for you to really dive in and really get into it. If you haven't listened to Octopus by this point, I highly, highly recommend that you do, especially if you're into more quirky music, if you're into music that really pushes the boundaries of things. Like, I still haven't heard an album from any other band that is close to Octopus from Gentle Giant. It's just so strange, it's so quirky, and it's so endearing as well. Whenever any band tries to emulate this kind of style of music, I always feel like it's either gimmicky, it's disingenuine, or it kind of falls apart at the seams. This is the one where it's so tightly knit that nothing could move, and it's that constraint that I just love so much. So yeah, give this one a try, and if you haven't listened to it quite recently, I highly recommend diving in and re-enjoying it, because yeah, this album has a lot to be enjoyed about. So that's what I got for Octopus from Gentle Giant. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that does it for another year of classic albums. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. I've really been enjoying diving into some of these albums that really helped shape where I fell in love with this style of music, you know? So I hope you guys had a good time. I had a great time, and we will see you next year in August for another Classic Albums Month. I can't believe that this one's already gone, but here we are. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you all so much for watching and bearing with me as I walk down memory lane with so many of these classic albums. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching this video and all my videos. If you haven't, please subscribe. And if you have subscribed, ring that bell. Because I have a lot of subscribers, but not a whole lot of views on my pages. So this is my yearly reminder to do all those fun things. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.